Motion number, I have 3, 6, 9, 10, 12, and 13. So motion number 3 in the name of Councillor Mary Freehill. Mary, motion number 3.
Yes, I'm just, this is the...
0.5 metres and footpaths.
That's right, yes, okay, I was just... Now, I must say that this raised a lot of very interesting response. I found it very interesting. You know, I took it up at the City Council, and Councillor Gagan said if I was taking it up, it must be a local issue. You supported me, Chair, because I want a regularisation of all of this. And I sent a letter to let the residents know, because we all get so many complaints about parking at the moment that, you know, we need to make sure that these residents are protected. And I must say that the stuff that came up on social media makes me feel that the militant wing of the Green Party, I think, have put a fatwa on me. Because I find any time that I take any of these issues up, they're off on social media, and people have written to me to tell me that they've been written to by these people telling them to have a go at me. So it's quite fascist kind of behaviour.
Anna, Mary, I just would ask you to take that back, that word.
Well, take back fascist.
I'd ask her to take that word back as well.
Okay, yeah, Caroline, I have, and she has, okay?
Well,
and I will let you in.
Go on then to say that it's very important that we regularise this. At the last meeting, or at our local area meeting, it came up, and Councillor Moore was very concerned that I hadn't sent her the letter, that I hadn't informed her of the work I was doing, which was as much her work as my work. And then when the whole thing came up on social media, she then makes a joke of me talking about narrow roads. She might be better employed, in fact, learning her political craft. She obviously doesn't know that there are minimum size and widths of roads. And that's what I was referring to. So the whole thing has turned out to be very destructive and not very helpful. So I just feel I had to say that because there's been a lot of destructive carry on social media, and which I have not responded to. But I am very keen that we do regularise this situation, that we find a way to protect the people in these roads. A lot of them in the cul-de-sacs were finding their own way of operating, but I just feel unless those people are sure that they can be protected, then we need to deal with this.
Okay, thanks, Mary. I have Caroline Moore and Pat Dund.
Well, Chair, do I get a right to reply on that? Or?
I'm letting you, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just want to say in terms of what's destructive and not very helpful in this conversation is actually writing to residents and willfully misinforming them about the nature of the vote or the report that was agreed. So I wasn't concerned when we spoke about this last time, Mary, I wasn't concerned that you hadn't sent me the letter. I was concerned that emails that we, the rest of the councillors on this area committee, were receiving from residents strongly implied that they had received willful misinformation from you as to the nature of...
Chairman, I'd ask you to intervene here and stop this conversation. It's getting very personalised.
Councillor Flynn, I'll let people go so far, okay? So just Caroline Moore speak, and then I'll bring Mary Freehill in. But let's try and work together. And I understand the comment. This is an issue that is more sensitive than perhaps people think. So Caroline Moore, and then I'll bring Councillor Freehill in.
The correspondence that I received from residents informed me that they had been told that all councillors voted to have residents clamped outside their houses, and they were under the impression that this was going to start happening immediately, even though Brendan O'Brien went to great lengths in the meeting, in the council meeting in June, to let people know that residents would receive due warning before any clamping took place, that they would be willing to look at specific circumstances where footpath parking was a necessity rather than what he referred to as lazy parking. And there were numerous other things that he went to great lengths to clarify for Councillor Freehill, which she then just wrote to residents, ignoring those clarifications that she had been given, and told them that other councillors had voted to clamp them outside their houses, and that Ivana Bacik would fight their case when either in the Shannon or when she got elected to the Dáil. So it was basically a very cynical piece of electioneering. And I don't take kindly. I don't take kindly to the accusation that anyone from the Green Party wrote to anyone asking them to attack Mary Freehill on social media. These things, by nature of the fact that they are publicly distributed, find their way onto social media, and then activist groups who are involved and invested in making sure that our footpaths are accessible to people who need them, quite rightly highlighted the fact that we had a councillor on this committee who was calling for people to be allowed to park on footpaths in certain circumstances. Now, I have since written to those same residents, and I have told them that what we need to do primarily is, as Councillor Freehill said, to work out a way to regularise their parking arrangements so that they're not actually forced to park on the footpath. And they were very receptive to that message, given that it didn't come with warnings that they were about to start getting clamped right outside their houses immediately, which was designed just to whip them into a frenzy of anxiety and upset over this. So I'm more than willing to work on this, and if Councillor Freehill is happy to work on it, I will work on it as well.
I've been working for the last 20 years.
Mary, come on.
What I will.
20 years I've been working on it.
Yeah, I know, but I'll let you back in.
Yesterday.
You'll be allowed back in at the end of your motion, Carolyn, just if you wrap up.
Yeah, no, but I mean, what I will not work on is trying to work towards a scenario where we facilitate footpath parking for certain people and then try to explain to other people that it's illegal or not acceptable. You either regularize parking arrangements for everybody so that nobody has to park on the footpath, and then we get the message across that parking on the footpath is just not acceptable.
What's your solution?
Thank you, James Kagan. No, yeah.
Thanks, Chairman. Look, I don't think this needs to be as contentious as it's currently being. I mean, first of all, the by-election's over, so let's move on from that. I mean, this is an issue of enforcing a decision that was essentially taken at a transport SPC. Rightly or wrongly, there are another number of residents who live on roads. I think, in fairness to both Councillor Moore and Councillor Freehill, there seems to be an acknowledgement that neither councillor wants people who have no alternative or no other place to park. Neither of those councillors. Neither of those councillors want those cars to be clamped, and that the express purpose of the transport SPC decision is to address parking on roads where there is alternative parking available, and essentially roads are being abused. So if there is a consensus on that, and it's not a partisan issue to identify that, we want to avoid any ambiguity on the instruction that ultimately the clampers are getting as a result of the transport SPC, well then, let's find an outcome there that, that is to the resolution, because I'm sure Councillor Moore knows these roads very well. It's in her electoral area. I mean, there is nowhere else for them to put their cars, and I don't know where the cars could be put if it did arise that ultimately every single cars on those roads would be clamped. There has to be some degree of pragmatism, while not taking away from the sensible decision, in my view, of the transport SPC to try and stop, cars where there are spaces available, essentially using footpaths in a way that impedes access for pedestrians and disabled people.
Thanks, James. I have Anne Feeney and Deirdre Conroy.
Thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, I unfortunately wasn't at the Transport SPC in June, so I didn't vote for or against this. Having said that, in principle, yes, it makes sense that people shouldn't be parked on the footpath, and there should be adequate space for people with disabilities or buggies or whatever, that their movement shouldn't be restricted by cars parked on paths. Having said that, we have said on numerous occasions that we have an old city with narrow streets, a lot of them, no off-street parking in some cases, some to do with the space, but some to do with the heritage of the streets or whatever. So, we have to face those realities. And I'm not confident when I hear from Brendan O'Brien that, you know, some of these will be looked at where there's exceptions. We have identified a number over the last number of weeks in our own area that just if they park on the road, there is no way a car can go up or down. So we either make those streets car free totally, or we realize that the practicality of it. You cannot look to alternative streets in a lot of cases for additional parking. There just isn't that, because these are a lot of old streets. So there's collateral impact for other areas as well. What I would like to see is Dublin City Council doing, before they enact this or before they enact any enforcement of this, is to do an audit of all of the streets in the city where this is a potential problem, and come up with solutions, or come up with non-enforceable. These streets are non-enforceable, but they need to do something. It is not good enough just to say, well, you know, we'll deal with it or whatever in a kind of ad hoc sort of way. That's not the way it should be done. If there was major roadworks or major infrastructure happening in any part of the city, notification should always go out to everybody that it's going to impact on. And that should be a principle that we would implement, that we would let people know, and we would let them know what action will be taken and when or whatever. So I would suggest an audit of these streets. I would suggest notifying people on the streets where it's unenforceable, that they won't suffer being clamped or fined or whatever, or that alternative solutions are found. But it can't just go ahead in an ad hoc way. I put in a question on this in relation to a number of roads, as did, I'm sure, other councillors as well. And the reply relates to one particular, Coulson Avenue, but there were many others I mentioned on it. So, you know, this sort of approach is just not good enough, I think. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. Deirdre Conroy.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's not just Coulson Avenue, but Templemore Avenue as well that I mentioned at our previous Committee of Minds meeting. I would know that it is a narrow road, like others historic roads in the area, for horses and carts in the past. But for instance, the residents on that road, where there's at least 40 houses, would have said they have asked for 20 to 30 years to have the footpath narrowed so that they don't have to park partly on the footpath, just as Villiers Road has had its footpaths narrowed. And it would just make it, Villiers is very narrow road still, and it isn't even one way. And what these people are also saying is that because there's no parking permits or double yellow lines on these narrow roads where they have to park outside their home, others that don't live in the area are parking there for weeks when they go on holidays. They have found cars just sitting out there for several weeks. So this is something that they have requested from City Council for several decades to have done. So rather than this idea of just clamping them all the time, it should be very affordable and possible for City Council to narrow the footpath. Then also the main problem is if people are trying to have vehicular access into their front gardens, that would have an environmental issue where there'd be removing railings and granite plinths. So and that costs a minimum of 5,000 for someone just to put their car into the garden. So this is something we really need City Council to do, and we need, what I want is clarification of the roads like these, the horse and cart roads, that are not to be clamped, because we're having too much requests about the clarity on this, please.
Okay, thanks. Just for my own part, I voted for the new bylaws. I think that in general, cars should not park on footpaths. But a bit like Anne Feeney, I recognise that it's an old city, and we can't have, unfortunately, a 100% one size fits all.
That's true. That's just what I said, Dermot.
You're throwing me off myself. In Pembroke, like, there's probably 3 roads that are affected. It's not a huge number. One of them is a cul-de-sac. One of them isn't. But one of the things I did find, and I do agree with Councillor Friel, some of the abuse and the level of intolerance on social media was unacceptable. Sometimes I think people believe that residents have no rights at all. You know, that only the cause is right, only the campaign is right. You know, there was a lot of sarcasm directed at the notion of local agreements. But in a lot of local communities, there is local agreements because that's the only way they can collectively live together. And residents agree to put parked cars in corners or put them on one side of the road or move them and not put them in front of the houses or put them in some people's gardens. That is how residents in difficult circumstances manage to live together. And we shouldn't dismiss that. You know, there should be, in general, no parking on footpaths. You know, when there are plenty of alternatives, people should leave footpaths for buggies and wheelchairs, etc., and normal mobility. But sometimes the local agreement is the only way forward. So in Councillor's motion here, Councillor Friel's motion here is looking for a working group, and I personally support that. Let's try and find a solution. That's what we're here for. We're here to try and find solutions. So can we agree to motion number 3?
May I just have the right to reply?
Yeah.
I think it just might be useful for members to know that this has been going on for a very long time. We actually had a working group on it at one stage. The council paid an outrageous sum for consultants that they did nothing about, because apparently the Department of Transport were less than helpful, but I think if we had pushed them at the time, we might have got someplace. We have also dealt, Villiers Road got their footpath now because that had been widened in the past. And there's also utilities under footpaths, and it's not as easy to lob off a footpath that might appear. So we have been through all of that. We have gone through all of that over the years. So, I mean, all I'm trying to do is to understand the difficulties these people are living in. I want to make sure they're protected. And that's what I'm doing, and that's what I want to see the traffic department to actually actively work on this to try and help people in these areas. So I would like maybe a separate meeting. I want the traffic department to come back. Now, Jerry, I don't know if you have any anything to say about it other than what's written down.
Okay.
Okay,
the issue with parking is ongoing, and I understand all the issues that have been raised. I'll speak to parking, and I'll work with them, and we'll see what can be done going forward. But I just want to say something to you. I'm not in favour of reducing the widths of pavements. You know, I wouldn't be in favour of reducing the width of pavements to facilitate parking. You know, my criteria is first with pedestrians, then public transport, then cyclists, and then cars. I understand people have to get around. I understand the necessity for a motor car in a lot of areas, but reducing the widths of pavements, I don't think it's the way forward. But having said that, I will speak to parking. I will raise the issues that you've mentioned with regard to maybe possible an audit. I don't know what the parking department's workload's like, but I'll speak to them. But just to let you know that, you know, like it's been said, there are a lot of cities, a lot of roads and cul-de-sacs in Dublin Southeast that are very narrow, and it's unfortunate that parking is an issue down there. But you know, we will work with the councillors, and we will try and see if we can come up with some form of solution for the future.
Okay, motion agreed?
Yeah, well, it is important that you're going to work, because I mean, the real problem in these roads is that you've got people coming in and getting free parking, and if we found a solution on that, we would narrow.
Mary, we've agreed the motion.
Okay.
Okay, motion number 6.